Thank you, Carmita. I appreciate it. I know that voice. I'll do a quick intro, and we'll get to what I believe will be a fascinating conversation for you guys, and just try and quickly articulate what we're trying to do and why. I led the Chicago Public Schools for 7.5 years before going to DC, and would love to talk to you about successes and all the things we did well, and we did a few things well. But I always say you're sort of motivated by that, but you're haunted by your failures. And on my watch, during my 7.5 years, on average, we had a child killed every 2 weeks due to gun violence. And never in one of our schools, but to and from home, on the bus, in the neighborhood. And I don't think I know we as adults failed to do a good job of keeping our kids safe and alive and free of trauma. My family and I left to go to DC in 2009. Very, very naively, I thought things couldn't get worse. And for a whole host of reasons, things got a lot worse in Chicago. I'm happy to talk about some of that. So for me, coming home after I left DC at the end of 2015, for me, this was the crisis facing the city. And Chicago gave me everything, educationally, athletically, culturally, socially. And to come back home and not work on this issue just didn't feel right. I won't throw too many stats at you, but the stats are a little mind-boggling. Chicago's the third largest city, as you know. New York and LA are bigger than us. Chicago has way more violence than New York and LA combined. Something called the clear rates, the percent of crimes that get solved. In Chicago, if you commit homicide, if you kill someone, that has a 17% clear rate, which means you have an 83% chance of getting away with murder. If you just shoot someone and don't kill them, that has a 4 to 5% clear rate. So basically, almost no crimes get solved. And you can't really talk about that without talking about race. If a lot more of those victims looked like me and not like my friends here, I promise you there'd be a very different clear rate. There'd be a very different sense of urgency. But because it's young black men dying on the south and west sides, that's somehow been an acceptable rate of loss. People say you need strict gun laws. I would love to get rid of guns. I'm radical on that. Chicago has some very strict gun laws, but we don't live in an island. There's no moat around Chicago. We live right next to Indiana. Indiana has some of the most lax gun laws. So the guns pour into us from Indiana. So for me, coming home, not being in government, can't change the gun laws, can't, from the outside, rebuild community and police trust, and we can talk about that. The only thing I could think to try and do was to work with the young men who are most likely to shoot and be shot, and that profile is the same. In Chicago, it's young black men, 17 to 25, 26, in 15 neighborhoods in the city, and to try and give them a reason to put down the guns and do something different. And so we started the work in 2016, which was unfortunately a high water mark in terms of violence. We saw a 15% reduction in 2017, 15% reduction in 2018. So far this year, we're down 30%, although this weekend was a very tough weekend. But to be clear, we have a long, long, long way to go. And while the numbers are going the right way, if you ask people, do they actually feel safer? Do you ask moms, do you ask kids, do you feel safer in those neighborhoods? The truth is they don't. So we have a number of amazing community partners we work with. This is a group from Emerson on Chicago's southwest side, 63rd in California. And what we do is we recruit young men, life coaches, mentoring, help with substance abuse. A lot of guys write their autobiographies, guys get their high school diplomas, work on trauma care, and work with us basically for a year and then spin guys off to the legal economy and try and give a pathway from the illegal economy, which all too often inevitably leads to violence, to the legal economy. We can't do this work without great life coaches, and I'll start with Billy and just explain to the audience, what is a life coach? What's your job?
The best way I can explain that is to say that as a young man, I made mistakes. So what I'm trying to do now is help these young men in my program by giving them as much as I can so I can try to save them from the consequences that I've already paid. The credibility that I bring to them is the fact that I've made some of the mistakes that they're making. And they can trust in that. As a young man, I got in trouble at 16 years old. I went away for 20 years. And the last thing that I want to see these guys do is to make that type of mistake where they won't do 20 years. They won't stand in front of young men 30 years later and talk about their mistake. I'm sorry. You know, right now in Illinois, you make the mistake that I made today, you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. And what I know about these young men, most young men, they're not somebody that you can just throw away. They're redeemable. A lot of them come up, you know, it's the circumstance. We never look at the circumstances. When we deal with young black men and we see the crimes and we look at the crime, you know, we never see the circumstance. You know, when we think about other things that happen with other communities, that the first thing they talk about is the circumstances. They create excuses. But these young men, I don't want them to ever be thrown away and looked at as not being redeemable. So I try to get them an understanding that you won't have that luxury. We live in these margins, that we don't have an opportunity for too many mistakes. So me serving as an example for these young men to hopefully fast forward their thinking and to where I'm at right now, that's the challenge. You know, but hopefully they'll learn from what I've done, and they can take that and have the things that we have to offer, you know, and take advantage of it so they don't have to pay those type of consequences that I already paid. You know, I'm standing in their gap, so, you know, they don't have to fall victims to that.
Tarik, talk about what you were doing before you came into the program.
Before I came into Iman, you know, I was living I was on a destructive path, you know, in and out of jail, you know, doing things that I thought were productive, but honestly, you know, really wasn't too healthy for me, you know. And my dad, you know, he was the one that pointed me in the direction, you know, to, you know, head into Iman. You know, I was kind of skeptical at first, but
Why were you skeptical?
just, it was something different, and, you know, being something taking me out of what I was used to, you know, out of my comfort zone. You know, it was like, they were speaking highly of it, you know, my uncle as well, you know, and I'm like, you know, just might as well give it a try because of the results of the things that I was doing. You know, it was just, it had me almost like in a hopeless, you know, position, and I was just, you know, didn't know where else to turn.
I want folks to understand just reality for us on the south side there. We also have programs on the west side, but ballpark, Tarik, how many of your friends have you lost? Friends and family to gun violence?
I lost count, honestly. I lost count.
Give an estimate.
Probably about 30 to 40 people that I know to gun violence, easy. Maybe even more.
Well, I'll ask everyone that, but I'm in schools all the time, 7th and 8th graders, you know, high school, and I always ask every class, how many of you know someone who's been killed? It's literally every time, every hand goes up. And I'll say, how many know 5, 10, 15, 20, and half the hands are still up. Sean, what were you doing before you came in?
Before I came to Iman, I was doing anything I could. Identity fraud, all type of stuff, like just going down the wrong direction. And that comes with a lot of conflict by itself, because there's always somebody, you know what I'm saying, that's try to stop you or you slowing down, you know what I'm saying, they business.
Yeah. How many of your guys have you lost?
I say right now I got like 2 friends left. Like a lot of my friends and family, people I went to school with, a lot of them been shot and killed. I can't even really count.
And I know you guys have all escaped that, that's why you're here, but you were in a car that got shot up.
Yeah.
Your friend was killed, you're in the car.
Like 2 months ago, my friend, he ain't had a car for like a week. He just got his new car. He happy, he riding around, blasting his music. And I guess he rolled through the wrong block too many times, and they shot in the car, killed him. Car did a whole 360. That mess with me every day, but I still push.
And then the one thing we do intentionally but carefully is we mix guys from different cliques, different neighborhoods, and not here, but in this cohort of young men in Iman, we have guys that their guys were on the other side of that gun. And how have you, when all the street, what you're supposed to do on the street is to retaliate, to get your lick back, and then we just had this endless cycle of revenge. What's it been like for you to try and build some trust with guys who took the life of your friend?
It's been real hard because one of the guys in the program, he was from over there. It wasn't him who did it, but he know the people. So every day it was like a time, I got over it now, but when we first started, it was a time I'm questioning all his actions. So I knew him before I came in, so I asked him every day, like, yeah, you heard him say what you think he mean by this? And that was kind of like exhausting, but as I got to grow with him and really watch his character, I started to trust him more. The life coaches would sit us down, and we go through like I wouldn't say problem solving, but different different topics on like life skills. And so after I started learning his character, it gave me a whole different outlook.
Gene, what were you up to before?
Previously, before a month, I had did some time. I was incarcerated for a long period of time for armed robbery. At the time, I was participating in that. I was young, wild, man. I ain't had no guidance. I really didn't grow up with no structure. So I was reacting to situations. I was trying to figure things out for myself.
What made you decide to switch, or how did you find out about Iman?
I found out about Iman. It was crazy because going through all that time I did, when I was young, I was 17, 18 when I was incarcerated. So going towards the end, when I was coming home, there wasn't no opportunities. I was lost. I didn't know how I was going to come home, how I was going to readjust, what I was going to do for myself. But thank God, when I did come home, I had a cousin who was previously in the program, who was participating in Core 1. And he kept telling me, man, just make some time for me so I can bring you on 63rd, man, make some time for me. So one day he brought me around, and it was crazy because when he brought me around Iman, I made connections with a couple of guys like Billy, Bilal. They took me under their wing. I promised the next day after I met these guys, they called me at 5 in the morning. Like, man, wherever you at, we're going to come pick you up. So they came to my block, my grandmother's house, picked me up 5 in the morning, took me out, was learning about me. And over the course of time from then, they just stuck with me. Every month, man, we're going to get you in the program. Just stay out of stuff, don't react, keep your head on straight. And they stayed true to their word. So I'm a part of cohort 2 now.
Ballpark, how many of your guys have you lost?
It was, like Tarik said, you lose count, but I could tell you 15 off top. And then it was so crazy also because, I don't know, I kind of grew up in prison in a sense. Like I said, I was wild before then, so that's when I started to take note of things. And I just remember being incarcerated, and I had guys who was my cellmates, 24, we 23. And I remember times where, they outdate or where they'll be going home, come up. And a week or two later, I just remember I could be on the yard or I'd be in the gym. And somebody would come through, oh man, such and such. Yeah, man, he got killed a few days ago, In my head, excuse my language, but I'm like, this guy just went home, So that's just it. And it was a lot of stories like that. So that was just the seriousness of it.
There's so many myths and misconceptions and stereotypes that are wrong. There's a myth that everyone's getting rich on the streets. The truth is very few guys are getting rich in the streets. We pay $11, $12, $13 an hour. I always ask the guys, usually about half that's actually a pay increase from what they're getting on the streets. Half it's a pay decrease, but they're willing to do that for the safety and the stability of it. In our first cohort, one of our worst shooters, the guy who's doing a large amount of shooting, he broke down his economics. He was making $80 a day, and we basically doubled his salary, and that was an easy trade for him to make. So Chicago, we lock people up in Cook County for $60,000 a year quite happily and don't debate that, but aren't willing to provide a job and a life coach for a fraction of that and help guys move to a different place. The second thing is no one has to come work in our program. Right? There's a myth that people don't want to change. No one's probation officers, police, courts, no one's mandated. For every cohort we've done, we have a waiting list. How big is the waiting list now at Iman, Billy?
We have 175 people on our waiting list, and we only have room for 25 guys. And this is without any type of advertisement whatsoever. You know, just guys just want a different way of living.
It's just all word of mouth. It's all first cohort talking to second cohort, guys talking to guys, and it's just, people say, how do you find, talk about disconnected youth. I always say it's not them that are disconnected. We're disconnected from their lives. And we found our first cohort in like 6 days. And it's a waiting list everywhere we go. Billy, talk a little bit about our history and what that has felt like, and give folks a sense of that.
Well, I never thought I was going to meet Arne Duncan. But I met Arne Duncan almost 2 years ago at a peace rally, at Father Flaga's peace rally in Chicago. And this was maybe 3 weeks after my own son had got murdered. He was shot 16 times. And a mutual friend of mine, a guy who actually works for Chicago CRED, wanted to introduce me to Arne Duncan. And me and this guy used to be like from 2 different, groups coming up that was rivals in the street. But we were doing the same type of work. And I asked Arne Duncan, I said, well, you know me? He was like, yeah, I know who you are, but I want you to tell me your story. Anyway, long story short, at 16 years old, I had shot and killed a young man by the name of Eugene Wilson, who was the #1 basketball player in the nation, who went to Simeon High School. He was also a friend of Arne Duncan's, who had played basketball with each other in high school. So needless to say, just like majority of Chicago, and for that matter, a certain community, they hated me. And I'm sure Arne felt a certain type of way. He was pretty much, I'm sure I wasn't one of his favorite people. Benji showed so much promise. Benji was kind of like majority of the young men growing up, in the community. He had a dream, but he actually had an opportunity that would have led him away from, what we are trapped in. And he represented a ticket that was lost, a dream unfulfilled, and I was pretty much responsible for that. It was a mistake, but at the same time, I did 20 years. So, moving 30 years later, I had an opportunity to meet Arne Duncan. At this time, I was working for Iman. And I had been doing this kind of work for maybe 10 years at the time, just working with men who had been formerly incarcerated, at-risk youth. My life was dedicated to just trying to make my community better. And because we were partners, a friend of mine introduced me to Arne Duncan. He was like, yeah, I know all about you, but tell me your story. So we walked with this peace rally, and we talked about everything. And at the end of that, I think Arne saw the person that I was today, and he pretty much understood the young man at 16 that I was, who was just misguided and made a tragic mistake. Unlike, it's no different from most of these young men who grow up, in certain circumstances where they don't have, the proper type of guidance. I think maybe 80% of the young men in our program come up in households without a father. If anybody here was raised by a mother and they say that, they turned out well, 9 times out of 10, it was some man in their life, whether it was a coach, a teacher, an uncle, a bigger brother who had that positive influence over them. But if it's not them, it's going to be the GDs, the Vice Lords, the Stones that's going to snatch them up. And they're going to end up, 9 times out of 10 in some trouble. And years later, they're going to find themselves maybe in a position like this, in a group like this. Long story short, Arne knew what I was trying to do, and he just opened his heart up to me, seeing me for the person that I was. And what we're trying to do is just get, society to see these young men for who they are, beyond the circumstances that they live in. and put just a human face to the tragedy that they're going through. Yes, tragedy, because a lot of these young men are suffering from trauma. 80% of the young men in our program been shot, some multiple times. I have a young man been shot 21 times. And guess what? He just caught a gun charge because he's living in the same community where he almost lost his life at 5 years ago. But now he's been charged as an armed habitual and facing 6 to 30 or 85%, only because he don't want to get killed, you know. So I'm trying to, you know, do the best I can to just get these men to work past their own circumstance, take this opportunity and make the most out of it, and just help them become better, you know, I'm not gonna say better people, just help them have a better situation, you know, because they're great people if you get to know them.
This work is fascinating, a million crazy stories, but I don't say this lightly. We do a lot of different things, trying a lot of different things. I would argue the most important thing we can do is provide these life coaches for our young men. And we have an amazing group of life coaches across the city, but I don't think any of them are better than Billy. And when his son was killed, and the truth is we have a pretty good sense who did it. What Billy said is that if that young man came into Iman, he would mentor him and give him a chance, because that's what he needed. And that's what I learned from Billy, because that blew me away. I can't say if my son or daughter, something happened to them, that I would mentor the person coming in. And he meant that sincerely from the heart. Billy, take another minute and talk about what you did recently with Benji's brothers.
So I had the opportunity to actually sit down with Benji's two youngest brothers. This was, you know, something that took 34 years to happen. They were willing at this time to open up their hearts to forgive me, and it was only right that I sat in front of these men and offered up my apologies. I think in order for Chicago to heal, you have to have an opportunity for things like this to happen. One of my slogans is the best way to retaliate is through reconciliation. And we have to teach young men how to resolve conflicts without it leading to, you know, these type of consequences. And we have to be, you know, I guess, I'm never one to tell a victim how to grieve the loss of a loved one. But now that I'm a victim, it wouldn't be right for me to tell these young men how to resolve conflicts without, you know, me being willing to, you know, extend forgiveness to the young man who killed my son and haven't even sought forgiveness. The only thing I can do is understand the cycle of ignorance that they caught up in, because I too at one time was caught up in that cycle of ignorance. I would love to be able to help them young men, you know, get their mind right and not, you know, put anybody else in that position of having to grieve, you know. But I had an opportunity to sit with Benji's younger brothers. They accepted my apology, and it was helpful for them to be able to heal from what they had been going through for the last 34 years. I invited Arne Duncan to sit down and be a part of that, because I know he was also, you know, a grieving friend, you know. But that's the work that we're doing in Chicago. We're trying to elevate people's consciousness to see these young men in a different way. You know, when you hear a news story about something terrible happening, you know, the only thing we do is look at the crime. We don't see the people behind it. We don't question the circumstances of why it happens, you know, unless it's, you know, somebody like Van Dyke shooting Laquan McDonald 16 times, and then we try to say he was in fear of his life, you know, or, you know, we look at the circumstances then when it's not benefiting, you know, young men who they just want to throw away. But yeah, I'm glad I got an opportunity to do that, and hopefully moving forward, you know, before things come to that point, we could teach men how to resolve their conflicts, you know, so we don't have to be sitting in front of each other, you know, discussing the loss of a loved one.
Tarik, we went down recently to Brian Stevenson's, I call it the Lynching Museum. I guess the Equal Justice Institute is the real name. But what was that like? And I could like see the light bulb going off in your head when you were walking through there. What was that like to see that?
It was, it was reality. Just like, you know, you waking up like, this is real. You know, I've been incarcerated before, but to see that in that manner like that is like, I was here, but now I can step back, take a step back and really look at what this is. It's like, it gave me a whole new level of insight to what's really going on, you know, with myself, you know, my community. And it showed me something different, like, and I started appreciating more the ones that, you know, are here for me. And I'm starting to not be so defensive, you know, on a lot of things, you know, and just listen. Because a lot of things that you thinking that are against you, really not against you, you know. And we be like our own, you know, our worst enemies. So that trip, it hit me like a ton of bricks to see that, like it's modern day, still going on today. So you have to stand on your toes. You gotta stay focused. You gotta take things seriously, you know. But in the same sense, you still have to love, you know. And it just made me just look at things from a whole nother perspective.
Sean, with the program in mind, maybe just give people a little sense, you know, what are you doing? Honestly, what's working in the program? What's missing? What are we not doing that would be more helpful? Just give people a sense of sort of what a normal day is like. What do we do?
All right, so at the mall, you get in, we check in every morning about 8:30. They like to see where your head at, what's going on with you, so you don't bring the energy you're bringing in. So I really appreciate that. And the things we tell them every morning, they make adjustments to try to make sure everything fit out. They give us opportunity to get a trade. They have electrician. You could be an electrician, carpentry, or HVAC. I chose HVAC. So after we check in, we usually go to our classes. They feed us lunch every day, real food, not no real food. It's a good to sit down and eat. Let's eat with each other. It kind of build a brotherhood. After lunch, we usually go back to our class, and before we check out, we just started doing yoga, meditation, and I think that's been helping a lot too, really ease the stress before we go back in the streets. So now we got some more energy we taking to everybody else. So I appreciate that. If I say I can't think of nothing that's not working right now.
What's missing? What would you like more of or less of? What are we not doing that would be more helpful?
If everybody was doing it, like if everybody got a chance, because it's still them people looking at us like, oh, y'all think y'all better, you know, they still struggling. So the only thing I can say, if more people was able to get involved.
Bring more in.
Yeah, get some more people out there waiting list.
Yeah. Gene, this was your first plane ride. What was it like to fly in a plane?
It was exciting. I thought I could withstand any type of pressure though until we started descending. But it was fun, and it was. I mean, that's another good thing about Emerson. I don't think they get enough credit for. Like before, this is my second flight. This is my second time seeing another city other than Chicago. And in November, Emerson just did a basic road trip, me and like 4 other guys to Philly and New Jersey. So it's just the exposure, you know, being with them, doing things like this, just telling me like I can do this for myself. It's not too strenuous, because it was a point in time I used to think going to another state was kind of beyond me or beyond my means. So yeah, that's another benefit, great benefit.
Social isolation is huge for our guys. We went to Alabama's first flight and just getting out. We'll go down the line. If we have a minute or two, I'd love to open it up. You guys probably have questions, trying to open it up quickly. But Billy, so these guys go home and go their regular ways. What do you want them thinking about? What do you want them knowing?
The one thing I've learned working with young men at risk is that they bring a lot of trauma. And this trauma, just didn't pop up. This trauma goes all the way back for most of them to childhood. And they come through a system of people not understanding how to deal with the behavior that they're displaying. And they end up getting penalized or labeled, and it doesn't get addressed. And a child is only responding to his pain, but he may not know how to communicate what the source of that pain is. And then you end up raising somebody to be a shooter or just a hurt person that's destined to hurt other people. What we have to do is start thinking about how do we help kids manage their pain when we would never probably understand the source of it. We can't just dismiss them, penalize them, and pass them on. And you're gonna send them right back to deal with the source of the pain. So we have to become a little bit more smarter and just help kids manage that pain so it doesn't be something that just dominate and just take over their life and they become unmanageable. They become a burden to society because now they're gonna go to prison, they're gonna hurt people, and because no one never helped them address or help them manage the trauma that they go through. And if we could start at that level, on that end, and then also, I know when I was young, I was told if somebody hit you, hit them back. I think we have to start changing that culture. We have to start institute restorative justice practice in grammar school. If two kids find themselves fighting in the playground, they need to be brought to the assembly hall, set in front of everybody, and they need to resolve that, work that out. It needs to be addressed right then and there. They shouldn't be suspended. They shouldn't be rewarded, for fighting back. These type of things need to be instituted on a cultural level, at that elementary level, so that we can start raising people who have the sense to want to resolve, want to find solutions and work things out. And remember trauma. CBI, cognitive behavior intervention, should be a part of the curriculum in schools because kids are suffering at home and we don't know what it is, but we need to help them manage that pain.
Tarik, what do you want people to go home thinking about?
I'm gonna add on to what Brother Billy was saying, that concern and that attention towards that trauma. It really does help, because it's like there's a war. I see it as like a war going on in our communities, not from just the police shooting, young black males down, and not just young black males, shooting each other down, but, with themselves as well, battling, to do better, and a lot of times, like I said, it's a fear to step out of that comfort zone from what they know, but it's crazy because that comfort zone is nothing but destruction. Right. So it's like, what do you have to lose? You have everything to gain, but you don't feel you deserve it. So that concern and that attention really does help because it's deeper than what meets the eye. It's a lot of beautiful things inside of people that it's just, if it's sometimes just pushed away, lost to the prison system, in the grave, and you're like, man, and you can say a lot of beautiful things about this individual, that individual, how much love he had, he or she, whatever, but it's like, it's just gone, So it's just, it's deeper than just what meets the eye, what people are just, painting,
Sean?
I would say just we ready for change. Like most of the things we do out of, like they say, pain or looking for escape. But I could say everybody, not just us, but everybody being around, they tired of the same thing and they ready for change because it's not working.
And Sean, you're a father. What does it mean to be a father? What do you want for your daughter?
I got to change my environment I'm in to just because I don't even want to raise my daughter up in the environment I'm in now, how things is. So that's just, they reminded me to push myself, but at the same time, like, something don't change, then we gonna have to leave, I guess.
Gene, what do you want all these people to think about when they go home?
I just want people to believe in us and like believe in what programs that Emerson doing. Like take note, like they really making a change. They really helping. Like I can't tell you like where I'd be at if it wasn't for Emerson. I mean that from my heart. Then just sit there every day and get the motivation I get from it, man. Like firsthand, like I say, like this brother said earlier, like to see him in the same setting with somebody like that he was into it with, that he couldn't trust. And you never knew how that situation gonna go because it was so early. But you know, they fostered that situation for them to be near each other. It's a lot of, I feel like if it was a lot more platforms for people to be near each other, but then you still had the caseworkers around who was trying to learn these people that was in these spaces. Like, I think violence would go down. I just want y'all to believe in us. I feel like it's a certain, in society, I feel like it's just a few of us that's forgotten that we written off. You know, you hear about a person that's a felon, we written off. You hear about people that commit violence, we written off, but a lot of us really want to, if we get the help, we'll change. We'll take it.
I apologize, we're out of time. We don't have time to take questions. We have to fly back to Chicago after this, but we'll stick around the hallway if people want to ask some questions. And again, the story is so powerful. Just two closing thoughts and we're done, is that people often say it's great you're giving guys a second chance, and I actually reject that. I think in many cases we're giving guys a first chance, and that at 13, 14, 15, they were sort of let down. Every guy's story is different and complex, but family, school, church, nonprofit, social service agencies, we were all absent from their lives when they were going through that tough time, through that trauma, and the only people stepping into that gap were the cliques, were the gangs, and they're present, rain, snow, shine, sleet. They are always hiring, there's always a job, there's always a couch to sleep on, there's always some gym shoes. And I think it's a first chance, and our guys made a rational choice at 13, 14, 15 because they had no other choices, and they're making a rational choice now at 22, 26, 27 because they have a different choice. I always apologize. I say I wish we would have been there much earlier and saved those years, but we are where we are. And the final thing, and hopefully it's self-evident, as I say all the time, these guys are not the problem, they're the solution. And my job, Billy's job, is to walk with them, to listen, to support. But I'm convinced 4 or 5 years from now, we're working with a couple hundred guys now. As we get to 700, 800, 1,000, 1,500, I'm convinced we have a chance 5 years from now to have Chicago be dramatically safer, dramatically different, give kids their childhoods back. It's be because of men like Gene and Sean and Tarik leading our city where we need to go. Please give them a round of applause.